Coming up today, the government is pressing the National Assembly to waste no time in passing its multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget proposal aimed at helping the economy overcome the MERS outbreak and the ongoing drought. With a wage dispute in deadlock, the two Koreas will hold talks next week on issues of mutual concern at their Inter-Korean Industrial Park. Plus, the International Monetary Fund cuts its global growth forecast for 2015 to 3.3%, citing weaker than expected economic gains in the United States. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, July 10th here in Seoul. Thank you, as always, for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the Korean government's efforts to give the economy a shot in the arm. The first full assembly of the July extraordinary session began on Thursday with the priority on swiftly passing a multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget bill. For this and more on the challenges facing the ruling party, Park Ji-won reports.
In its first gathering since the resignation of ruling Saenuri Party floor leader Yoo Seung-min the day before, the party's Supreme Council emphasized the importance of party unity. Speaking at their regular meeting on Thursday morning, the council vowed to establish a better line of communication with the presidential office.
We took this opportunity to achieve stronger party unity and pursue politics for the public. We will prioritize the economy and the livelihoods of the people through better communication among the party, the government, and the presidential office.
The party plans to select its new floor leader next Tuesday at a general meeting of its lawmakers. The Supreme Council said the party might use consensus to make the decision rather than a vote in order to avoid further conflict between factions. Meanwhile, the first full assembly of the July extraordinary session began with a budget speech from the president on Thursday, in which she called on the parliament to cooperate in passing a supplementary budget bill for approximately $10.4 billion. The budget message was read by Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won.
The supplementary budget plan includes items needed to overcome the instability and difficulty that have arisen due to the MERS outbreak and the current drought. Once the plan is confirmed, the government will swiftly implement the budget to help stabilize the economy.
The main opposition party, however, criticized the plan and presented their own, which cuts the $10.4 billion proposal to $5.5 billion.
We can't agree with a plan to inject nearly $5 billion that aims to make up for a tax revenue deficit, without any plans to revamp spending or raise corporate taxes. Our party will cut items not related to the MERS outbreak, the drought, or the livelihoods of the people.
The ruling party and the government hope to pass the plan by the 20th of the month, but due to the vacancy in the floor leadership of the ruling party and the determined objections from the opposition party, it's not clear whether they will be able to achieve their goal. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The Korean government has rolled out a slew of measures aimed at boosting trade in certain industries such as construction. Officials hope the steps will boost an economy suffering from tumbling exports, sluggish consumer spending and the fallout from the MERS outbreak. Choi Sun reports.
A number of external factors, such as the weakened Japanese yen and falling oil prices, have cut Korea's export volume in the first half of this year by 5% compared to a year earlier. This, coupled with reduced spending and investment at home due to the MERS outbreak, has prompted the government to devise additional stimulus measures on top of a $20 billion stimulus package that's on the way. At Thursday's Trade and Investment meeting, President Park Geun-hye laid out policies covering various sectors, including trade and construction, to achieve a balance in domestic consumption and exports.
기업인들이 마음껏 투자할 수 있도록 추경을 비롯해서 정부가 가진 모든 정책 수단을 동원할 필요가 있습니다.
while highlighting that Korea has fared relatively well in exports, jumping a spot in the global rankings to 6th. The president said the country's export-driven economy will not be revived without a recovery of trade. The Trade Ministry has pledged to more than double Korea's trade volume from the first half of the year by spending more than $100 billion from the public and private sectors to enhance the competitiveness of major export items and to financially support small to mid-sized exporters. The ministry did not, however, present a specific plan for raising the price competitiveness of Korean products against their Japanese rivals. Shifting gears to the construction industry, President Park said spurring renovation and the reconstruction of aging facilities is expected to encourage businesses to spend more, and the government has pledged to ease regulations in the sector. In venture capital, officials vowed to create an ecosystem where growth and returns are guaranteed. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now, the government is also focused on revitalizing Korea's flagging tourism sector, which has been having a torrid time as well since the outbreak of MERS in late May. Officials have vowed to go on an aggressive marketing blitz overseas to show foreigners, particularly those from China and other Asian countries, that it's safe to come to Korea for a vacation. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
With concerns about the MERS outbreak receding, demand for travel-related products is picking up fast. Tickets to spa resorts and water parks like these jumped 450% from the week of June, and reservations for condo rentals and campsites also spiked nearly 150%.
I came to the water park today with my family and friends to enjoy the summer holiday. I know there are a lot of concerns about the MERS outbreak in Korea, but I believe the worst is over, and I'm not too concerned about it at this point.
It's welcome news for the local tourism sector, which has been rocked by the MERS outbreak. The industry's business survey index for the second quarter, based on roughly 150 travel companies, shows sentiment was even lower than it was in the months following last year's deadly Seoul ferry sinking. To address these concerns, the Culture and Tourism Ministry on Thursday outlined plans to support the tourism industry at a trade and investment promotion meeting led by President Park Geun-hye.
먼저 관광 산업의 활성화 방안입니다. 메르스 사태로 어려움을 겪고 있는 관광 산업은 이번 기회에 아예 경쟁력을 제고할 수 있는 근본적 대책을 마련해야 합니다.
The Culture Ministry vowed to launch a global campaign letting people know that it's safe to travel to Korea now that the MERS outbreak has subsided, and said it will also develop targeted programs for tourists of different ages and nationalities. The government also says it'll waive fees for group visas for travelers from China and Southeast Asian countries until September. The government is currently supporting the local tourism industry, which has been hit the hardest by the outbreak, with around $79.2 million in special loans, and it plans to increase that through a budget supplement of around $264 million later this year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News, Hongcheon.
The International Monetary Fund has trimmed its growth forecast for the global economy for this year by 0.2 percentage points to 3.3%. In its latest World Economic Outlook, which was released on Thursday, the IMF cited the US economy's weaker than expected performance in the first 3 months of the year as the major driving factor behind its decision. The IMF warns growth could turn out even weaker, though, if the issues affecting Greece and China drag on too long. The agency says the fallout from the Greek debt crisis is hard to predict and could rapidly worsen if Greece leaves the Eurozone. Now, China's stock market rout has also played havoc with the world's commodity markets. The IMF also identifies some other issues that could knock the global economy off course, including the geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and Ukraine. Now, Greece has just started handing over its economic reform proposals to its international creditors. No details have been released yet, but local media in Greece say the proposals will include public spending cuts worth $14.3 billion, tax hikes, and a raise of the retirement age. Now, these had originally been issues Greece's socialist government said were red lines it would never cross. Now, these reported concessions come as Greece's banking system is teetering on the brink of collapse, with bank closures extended until the end of this week. Eurozone leaders have given Athens a final deadline of Sunday to agree to reforms that could help Greece avoid bankruptcy and a possible departure from the euro. If Greece's proposals are deemed acceptable, the country's creditors could sign off on a third multi-billion-dollar bailout that should allow Greece to stay inside the currency union. And China's financial markets rebounded on Thursday, bringing the local bourse higher as well. But analysts have cautioned that one day of relief does not mean the crisis is over. With the Greek debt crisis grabbing most of the international attention, they say it's actually the worrying goings-on in China that should be topping the headlines. Kwon So-ah has the details.
Like jumping from a cold pool into a hot tub. Korea stocks experienced a roller coaster Thursday, with the lowest and highest point of the main index more than 44% apart, the biggest difference this year. The benchmark Kospi dropped below the psychologically important 2,000 mark once on Thursday for the first time in 4 months. Stocks dropped throughout the week, and while the decline was attributed to the Greek crisis, many in Asia believe the source of the problem is much closer. In China, the world's #2 economy's benchmark Shanghai Composite Index fell by around 30% in the last 3 weeks. Despite a rebound on Thursday thanks to regulators banning shareholders with big stakes from selling, concerns are that China's meltdown could be as bad as the 1929 stock market crash.
There is a sense of uncertainty in the markets now following the drop in Chinese shares, even while the Chinese government sought measures to contain the market and while there is a lack of progress in the debt crisis in Greece.
And the impact is becoming more pronounced in Korea, too.
For Korea, China plays a much bigger role than Greece. On top of that, Korean companies such as Hyundai and Samsung aren't performing that well, so the problems in the domestic economy, in addition to the ones in China and Europe, all combined are a very risky situation for Korea.
Some experts think China's Shanghai index will drop all the way down to the 3,000 level, calling for preemptive measures in Korea, as a collapse in China's financial market could heavily weigh down on domestic spending due to the two countries' substantial volume of trade. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The two Koreas have agreed to meet for talks on their jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex next Thursday. Seoul's Unification Ministry says Pyongyang sent a letter this past Thursday agreeing to hold the 6th round of meeting for their joint committee on the management of the business park. Attention now shifts to whether the two sides will be able to resolve their ongoing tussle over a pay raise for the tens of thousands of North Korean workers at the complex. Now, earlier this year, Pyongyang demanded a unilateral wage hike of over 5% for the workers, but Seoul said the issue must be agreed upon through dialogue. South Korea's top diplomat says the Korean public shouldn't fret too much about Japan's attempts to backpedal on its admission that it forced Koreans into slave labor at sites that were recently bestowed UNESCO World Heritage status. That's because if Tokyo wants the sites to remain on the prestigious list, it'll have to change its tune pretty quick. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se has called on Japan to take sincere steps to fulfill international expectations and enhance bilateral ties between Seoul and Tokyo.
This was one of the most difficult negotiations between Korea and Japan. I hope Tokyo will take follow-up measures that meet international expectations and by doing so, improve bilateral ties.
The statement made Thursday at a forum at the Korea Press Center in Seoul comes after Japan failed to fully accept South Korea's demand to acknowledge that Koreans were forced to work at 7 sites recently granted UNESCO World Heritage status. He said the English version of the statement has been officially adopted by the World Heritage Committee, and Japan should follow through on the promise it made to the UN body. Yoon also said there is no need to make predictions about what Japan will do, as it must follow up on the matter by submitting a progress report by the end of 2017. which will be reviewed by the World Heritage Committee the following year. And if Japan's progress is deemed unsatisfactory, the sites could be removed from the UNESCO list. At the forum, hosted by Korean journalists, Yoon also discussed North Korea. He noted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has executed more than 70 officials in his first 3.5 years in power, which is 7 times more than his father, Kim Jong-il. This indicates that the current North Korean leader is still struggling to maintain his grip on power. Yoon added that North Koreans appear to have become increasingly fearful of Kim's so-called reign of terror, with some seeking to defect to South Korea. The minister said President Park Geun-hye and her U.S. counterpart Barack Obama are expected to reach an important deal on ways to deal with the communist regime when they meet in Washington later this year. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
That's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you as always for tuning in, and we do hope to see you at the same time on Monday. Until then, goodbye.